Thank you, Nick, for coming and being the champion of change and starting it. It's the Wavemaker Podcast, where we try to feature the stories of people driving the change. And I think it made sense to start with you as well, because you were kind of my tunnel into Maritime. So please introduce yourself, and who are you, and how did you end up in shipping?
Wow, that is a big surprise. So I didn't realize I was the first person to come on the podcast. So, of course, that is a massive honor. I suppose, my name's Nick. I'm the CEO of Greywing. Greywing's a generative AI company that focuses on everything within shipping, from crewing to technical to commercial operations, in terms of delivering generative AI solutions that enable people to talk to their data. And I suppose, how did I end up in shipping? Well, it's a funny old story, because I went to a Salsa class after I'd recently left the military. And whilst I was hanging out at the bar waiting for this class to start, I met some guy who was like, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, actually, I've just left the military, out of work, not really doing too much." And he said to me, "Oh, no way. Maybe you could work for me. I've got a company that protects ships from pirates in the Indian Ocean and West Africa." And so after a couple of bad salsa lessons, I ended up working on some heavy lift cargo vessels transiting through the Indian Ocean back in 2011. And after I did that for a few months, I thought, well, maybe I could set up my own company. So I set up a maritime security company, ran that for 10 years. And then I thought, let's get into a digital platform, focus on the industry I know best, shipping. And I came to Singapore to set that up. And that's where I went into a startup incubator called Entrepreneur First, where I met a lot of awesome people, and one of whom was you. So I don't know, can you reflect back on that story of how we originally met?
Yes, I mean, it was quite cool, right? So I think you had the most adventurous background among all these super cool people that were introducing themselves in the Slack channel at that time ahead of the program. And then you came in and we were like, oh, this guy is actually like going in with the pirates, and now he wants to spin that off into the tech. Like, this is going to be crazy. And and then we started having bubble teas and started reflecting on our entrepreneurial journey. And like, for me, at that time, that too, I was like, I never really understood shipping. It was like not something that I actually saw myself in either. But then I think your cool background was keeping us all one eye on shipping, And then here we are 5 years later. Not that that was the plan. I somehow sailed into it through decarbonization. But it's really cool that we get to hang out also and talk about work as well. I don't know how that affects the friendship, but we talk a lot about shipping as well. And now I'm actually surprised how interesting it is. Like, it's so dynamic, and it really keeps one's mind always on top of its game.
Yeah, shipping's super fascinating because it's operating 24 hours a day. I remember when you were thinking about going to work for Maersk, where you were before. One of the things that, I was desperately trying to come and get you to work for our company, and I was like trying to, give you the best deal that I could. And you were like, no, decarbonization is where my heart is. I want to be doing ESG. I want to be focused on, the biggest impact I can have in the world. And I don't know, was it, Maritime contributes something like
2%.
Was it 2% or 3%? 3% of, global carbon emissions is coming from maritime. And then I think Maersk's chunk of that was also quite substantial. So you said, if I'm working in a single organization where I can have the greatest impact on trying to reduce the carbon footprint of global industry, it's probably going to be within the shipping industry. And to see your journey kind of take you through to the point where, okay, now, I'm setting up a company specifically focused on reducing this carbon imprint on the basis of the experience that I had working in a startup, and then the experience I had working at a market leader within the shipping industry, and now taking that blend of experience and trying to pull together, large legacy shipping companies with all of the challenges with working with large, organizations that in some cases are hundreds of years old. to introducing cutting edge startup methodology where things change every week. Like the knowledge you learn this week is out of date by next week, and it moves so quickly that it's hard really to not feel like you're constantly moving through quicksand. So yeah, I mean, it's been an adventure for me to see you kind of pulling that up and making those things happen.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like now we're swapping the podcast. I'm like, this, but it is.
All right, let's get the questions coming back the other way.
No, but I do think it is interesting because it is so intertwined, right? Because we've been like growing together through this startup environment as well, and somehow these two collided, right? This like maritime and digital transformation in maritime angle, and then the decarbonization angle, and the people of industry are. So with that, I'm gonna ask you, like, how does it feel for you, and how has it felt for you, like, from where you started with Greywing and how you at that point were helping organization to how it feels now?
It's a really interesting one because I think when we started with Greywing, we worked with the tools that were available to us at the time. And, broadly speaking, we were introducing vertical SaaS solutions that relied on algorithms and over time, machine learning to deliver solutions to customers that solve problems, and so we had these really clear-cut value propositions. But the real challenge for us has been there is a slow, measured pace of adoption within the maritime industry. And I wrote a little bit about this in an article that will be going out next week, around how I think that is very much by design. I think as a startup coming into the maritime industry, there's this sense that the industry moves slowly, that it's got long sales cycles, that it's incredibly hard to affect that change. But when I take a step back and look at the industry through the lens of someone who's maybe worked in shipping for almost 15 years, I look at the level of instability and the inherent risk of operating vessels at sea and what the consequences of that can be if things go wrong. And then I map that back from the perspective that you've got all of these vessels carrying $32 trillion worth of cargo on an annual basis. And I take a step back and look at that and I say, well, what's most valuable to the consumer? Who's ultimately buying these goods? Is it more valuable to the consumer to have a vessel operator implement a solution from a startup that might give them some incremental benefit, or could potentially have some kind of risk, whether it's around data protection, physical risk, or maybe technical risk? And there's probably quite a few good examples of technical risk where it causes issues with the vessel's operations, and thereby introduce this potential instability into the global supply chain. And I think, I can really understand why there is that measured pace of change and why people take their time about making these decisions, because the potential impact on the ability of goods to get to their final destination, to the ultimate consumer, the rest of the world, is, the Evergreen vessel that got trapped in the Suez Canal. What a great example of the impact of one incident on global shipping. The Houthis attacking vessels that are traveling through the Red Sea, Somali piracy, all of these instances where you've got elevated risk within the global supply chain, broadly speaking, increases prices for the end customer. The person in the shop at the petrol pump that's trying to buy resources, it drives up those costs. So, when I take a step back and I think about, well, why isn't it adopting more quickly? I think, well, that's why. It's because the world needs that stability to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis, given all of the other inherent stability within, the world, or perceived instability. It's hard to work out whether what's in the news is an accurate reflection of reality. And so I can see that, that's why it's got the slow pace of change.
I think to add on to this, I've seen it also internally working with technical teams at Maersk, right? And when we looked at different projects, and I was always this probably the impatient person that really wants to make this happen. And I saw, okay, there's so many resources that we can leverage to actually do certain things. And I did experience also that cultural slowdown, like, okay, wait, let's take a step back. Let's look at these things. And I realized with time why, because they really need to calculate the risk, because these are huge assets we're talking about. Like a small change in a number has a really, really ripple effect and a big difference later on if it's looked over, right? And then I was like, okay, I get it. Like I come from a different world. These things, to me, like missing a certain number or like not maybe devoting enough time to understand something, like I could fix that. But in this industry, you can't just fix it tomorrow. And when you move a whale, things move, right? So then I understood, okay, culturally, there's a difference. And certain things are there for a good reason. And then also now there's this balance where you can be like that, but also be open to the new things that enable us to move faster, that can help us predict this risk and adjust the risk. And yeah, I think that for people who are deciding whether to go for a certain solution or not, it is also this fear of not being able to control the aftermath, right? So how was it for you when you talk to stakeholders and try to let's say sell a solution?
I think what you just highlighted around, just because something's got risk attached to it, it doesn't mean that you won't take that risk if you've imposed the correct mitigation controls or measures around that operation. And we see that all the time in maritime. You know, whether people sail their vessels through the Red Sea, take different routes, go into carry cargoes within West Africa where there's a lot of elevated physical risk. People put in place mitigation measures and take those risks. And so I think whilst we sit in this industry that is slow to change for very understandable reasons, I think there's this balance between customers that use that inherent unwillingness of, or not unwillingness, that's not a good word, but inherent characteristic of the industry to be slow to take on new innovations, to perhaps not move and not look at new innovations and wait for other people to really lead the way. But then I think like any other industry, you've got people that are thought leaders and, if you like, action leaders, where they proactively take those actions in order to introduce and invite that innovation in. And I think the question is how do you impose those risk mitigation measures around working with new platforms, new technology, generative AI, all of these exciting things, which are great from a media perspective and a PR perspective. But when it comes down to it, for a lot of people, there's shipping companies that have announced digitization projects where the digitization project was to move from paper to PDF in terms of their documentation. But, they advertise it as being a digitization measure. But I'm not sure if moving from paper to PDF truly gave them a competitive advantage over their competitors. And I think that's the challenge that I see in some customers' approach to digitization and AI, is there's this mentality that you have when you play sport of playing to win. You're trying to play and go for that outcome with the understanding that you might lose. But then there's this other mentality that you can come across from people where they're playing not to lose. And so they're playing not to lose, and so they've got this mentality where it's going to be very hard for them to win because they're not taking those leading edge risks to be able to, punch through to whatever the best outcome is. And so when I think of the relationships that we've built with stakeholders within the maritime industry, I think, we often come up against a lot of resistance. And I've got to be honest, and this might be unpopular, it's often from the older members of teams, across all aspects of the shipping company, or, whether it's technical, commercial, or crewing, who, really unwilling to take that leap or to engage with new technology, and they actively push it away. And it can be fascinating because you'll be sat in a meeting, and I was in this meeting recently, and the company's got 2 fleets, and the person that is operating one fleet is quite old, and the person that's operating the other fleet is younger than I am. And they've both got quite reasonably sized fleets. We're talking tens of vessels. They're each operating one each, and and this is a generalization, but it's a generalization I've observed to be true, where, often people who are a little bit longer in the tooth are very against, taking change within AI or technology or introducing new platforms. But then people in exactly the same position who are a bit younger, who are a bit closer to being a digital native, and actually often younger than I am, which I think is interesting, are much keener to engage and to move along with adopting technology, AI, or kind of looking at different outcomes. And look, that's a generalization. I don't think it's fair to say that applies across everyone. But the number of times I've been in a meeting where there's been a leader who's been very against AI technology, let's be frank, generative AI is something that scares a lot of people. Whereas all of the younger members of the team are super keen on it and really trying to advocate for it up the chain, but they get shut down, is really disheartening, because I suppose it's the younger people that really have an eye on where the future is going to be,
And on this note, do you think that having Rishi, who joined Greywing, right, quite young, I think he was one of the youngest people in the EF cohort, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that was one of the crucial moments for Greywing, and how in an agile way you were able to kind of go through different challenges like COVID and pivot and adapt, and now again make use of the latest opportunity in the world as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got to be honest. Having Rishi as a co-founder, and maybe independently from how his youth, because I think, all right, he was young, but he was also extremely mature as a business operator, and in terms of how he saw the world, because I think he'd compressed much more experience into his life than perhaps other people at his age might have. Was undoubtedly one of the reasons we were able to keep moving, keep pivoting, and continue to create, as I saw it, opportunities from what to other people might have been perceived disasters or perceived kind of issues. And yeah, I mean, whether it's Rishi or anyone else within, the organization that I work in, I love it when someone turns up, they're young, they're smarter than I am, they've got better ideas than I have, because they're the right people to hire. I don't want to ever be in a situation where the people that I'm hiring, independently of how old or young they are less intelligent or have less innovative ideas than I do. Because, all right, I'm 42. I'm not on the cutting edge of technology. Okay, if we adopt stuff at Greywing, I'm the last person to adopt it. I'm like the barrier to all innovation within the company that I sit in, and so. In the same way that I see this happening in, prospective customer companies, where you've got a barrier to innovation who's in a leadership role. I am very hyper aware that I kind of sit in the same position in my own company, where some of the decisions that I make, or the kind of control measures that I put on my team members, put us in a position where we might be less likely to be able to take the most advantage of technological innovation and what's actually out there. So it is a bit of a paradox in a way, because I can see this in other organizations and it's easy to critique it. But if I kind of turn it around and look at myself, I'd have to say, am I the one that's holding back younger operators within my company from advancing the company's interests more effectively than perhaps, I can. So it's a real duality.
And when you were saying this, I was wondering, how was that day, when Rishi probably played with AI and realized, okay, we have a real use case, and then came to you? Or how does it normally work when he comes up with something that can really shift the direction?
Yes, it's interesting, because I don't think it like happened on one day where, okay, AI's here, we're going to do this. There's a natural path here for us to get through to a great outcome. I think ChatGPT 3.5 came out. People started talking about it. People started using it in the office. I'm not even sure if Rishi was the first one to use it. I can, I'd look back through the emails to try and understand where the history of AI at Greywing had come from, because I'd written some content on it. And what I remember is it was actually some maybe other members of the team that had begun to play with it and advocated and highlighted it and brought it up. And then Rishi started looking into it. And so I think in early 2023, Rishi was spending some time on side projects, messing around with it, seeing what AI could do. And then, we'd had this this challenge, and I won't go into what it was, but, broadly speaking, there was this challenge with data, sourcing data and turning unstructured data into structured data, and then being able to search millions of rows of data that we had to deal with. And previously, the tools that we'd had to achieve this hadn't really been able to give a good result. We weren't able to get the right data sources. But then when we introduced generative AI and we started implementing it into this process, it was able to spin it up really effectively, worked perfectly, customers were happy with it, and it was super exciting. So I think that kind of gave us a bit of an insight into what could happen. And then after we ran that project, we plugged generative AI into kind of global distribution systems for flights, so you could have a conversation with the flight database to isolate, where flights were available. And then I think the kind of final evolution that we went through, which was in September of 2023, which is really where actually, that's not true. So we then innovated where you could query and talk to your data. And then I think in December, we released a project that we'd done with BWLNG where you could input complex, cargo and machinery operations manuals, and you could have a conversation with the document. And so that's kind of led us around to the point where we've got these two core products that we're taking to market at the moment, which broadly speaking enable people to query their data and turn it into actionable intelligence. But, there was no roadmap to those products 15 months ago. And I think it's only now that it's been in the hands of customers for long enough where we've really been able to isolate the use cases that move the needles for the customers.
And do you see the change in the customers, let's say, feeling of risk, right? Like before they started using the product and when they start using the product, do you think that there's this moment when they're like, it's actually not that scary as I thought, or it's not that risky as I thought?
Yeah, I suppose, I don't know if that's a fair question to ask, because it's the customers who are interested in innovation that buy the product. At the moment, I think given where we are with generative AI in the industry, we are at a level where we've got innovators and we've got early adopters who are beginning to buy and use the product. I don't think we're at the stage yet where people that have concerns about AI are adopting it. So they aren't getting that kind of dislocation of expectations where they think, oh, well, this was going to be really bad. It's actually turned out to be really good. So I don't think we've seen that yet. I think the path that I've seen people take, where they've got concerns about AI, where they feel like they should do something, where they think this is going to be a great outcome, but they don't know what to do next, is they buy Microsoft Copilot, which is kind of like, it's... I don't know what Microsoft Copilot really means from an organizational perspective, but I don't think, there's going to be a shipping company in 10 years' time that's going to say, oh, well, because we invested in Microsoft Copilot in 2024, it gave us a competitive advantage, and now we've grown our market share by 25%. They're probably going to say, well, of course you would invest in Microsoft Copilot because it's an off-the-shelf product that all companies are going to use. So I think there's that kind of challenge around the adoption of AI, where it's a small segment of the market that are adopting it. They're, broadly speaking, having a good experience. They think it's exciting, they think it's awesome, and they're amazed with what it can do. But then everyone else, if they're trying to brand themselves as being proactive with AI, are buying Microsoft Copilot so that they can put that out on their communications to their stakeholders as them proactively adopting AI.
Yeah, and I oftentimes feel that the industry is not even aware how much of the path you're front running. Actually, you are like at the cutting edge of innovation, and it's almost like there's a whole rocket going to Mars that people are not really aware that it's happening. And with all of this, what do you think has or is your superpower when it comes to driving things in maritime?
Greywing's advantage has always been its ability to bring the latest technologies to market and to turn them into products that serve users. I think that's something that we've demonstrated real competence in. And I think the customers that work with us see a extremely high level of technical ability in our ability to deliver what we're going to say that we can deliver that other companies are unable to. I mean, broadly speaking, I think that's because we're more of a deep tech company than perhaps a vertical SaaS company.
In the internal dynamics of the team or how you come together, what has been the secret sauce like in the past, I guess, 5 years now, huh?
Yeah, I mean, look, we love working with complex technology. You know, we love building new things and we love solving problems for customers. I don't know if there is any secret beyond that. I love what I do. You know, I love the opportunity to work with cutting edge technology and people that are able to deliver things that are have never been invented in the world before. That it's, you know, that I would never normally, you know, be able to interact with this technology. And I love the challenge of introducing it to customers in a way that makes it easy for them to adopt and, you know, navigating that process of trying to engage all of the stakeholders in an organization so that they feel comfortable working with Greywing and also maybe working with technology that they perhaps haven't come across again before. That's what I love about it. I mean, it's really a fascinating industry to be in because, you know, a lot of people will say that the maritime industry is archaic and it's old, but actually I think in some areas, you know, it moves really fast. And the biggest thing about maritime for me is the relationship level. Once you start working with the customer and you build that trust and you build that long-term relationship, you know, you're really in a position to advocate for change and innovation within that organization because they've built that relationship with you and they're probably never going to leave. I mean, as long as you maintain the level of service or cutting edge delivery that you've been giving to them so far, then, you know, that's a long-term relationship because in the same way that it's hard to get started in shipping because of their resistance to inviting anything into the industry that might cause instability, once you become part of that fabric of the industry that ensures that stability, you know, it's you're pretty much going to be there for a long time. So I like that. You know, I like being able to work in an industry where we're, you know, working with challenging problems on vessels that have all of these risks associated with them. And, you know, the industry itself is extremely complex. You've got owners, you've got managers, you've got commercial operators, you've got crew managers. So you've got all of these different stakeholders with, you know, competing interests sometimes, all of these different data sources, and then trying to pull this all together into a single solution is, I mean, it's a little bit like a game of 3D chess, and it's super fun.
It is. I can definitely underline that. And I also had a thought about this element of trust. Why is it so important in the shipping industry? And on one of my walks, like while I was working at Maersk, I was thinking, it's no wonder, like so many people that are now in offices were once on board, right? And that is that environment where you really trust each other with your life, right? And that's all you can, right? And I think that is later translated into the companies. So I find that quite interesting because once they're in it, they're in it. And they also, I experience like when they hire you, at that point, they really trust your decision-making power. And it's great. At that point, it's really empowering to be able to drive something and be a part of it. So, but I can also feel it on this other side as a founder, right? Like how much initially there's resistance to change. It's more like they spend quite a good time to observe you and look at you before they decide to fully engage in. And yeah, there is some beauty in that part as well. Although it can be frustrating as a founder, right? when you remove that hat and like look at the scenery as it is, there's some beauty to that element. And also for us, I think the challenge to like, okay, how do I navigate this puzzle? It really tests us to change our approaches and do a series of mini experiments essentially on what will unlock things. So yeah, once a founder.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we do a lot of marketing. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. You know, we're really upfront about advocating for what we're doing because I think it's important for people to understand the identity that Greywing has in the industry. But when I look at where our business comes from, it comes from warm recommendations, and those are warm recommendations from customers we work with or vendors that we work with that we integrate with. And, you know, that is the source of all the deals, which is insane, really, when you think about it. That, you know, what that represents is no one's ever really seen and developed a relationship specifically with Greywing and, you know, then approached us and we've started working with them. Every relationship that we've built up has come through a recommendation from a different customer, which or industry stakeholder, which I think is fascinating, because again, it's people trying to de-risk this relationship by verifying it against, you know, what other people have experienced, which I think, you know, just goes to show how careful people are in the shipping industry of considering the actions that they're going to take, and like you said, how that's going to affect the guys that are on board the vessel.
And now when you think about the future, how do you see the world in 2030 according to Nick?
Yeah, this is a really difficult one because I think AI is moving so quickly that we are really unable to understand how the world's going to look in a year's time, let alone in 2030, you know, if we look kind of 4 to 5 years out. I would say the pace of change that's happening for us at the moment is so fast in terms of the customer interactions and expectations that we're dealing with and the types of data that they want to apply generative AI to, that it's increasing. People are asking for more. They have higher expectations, and we're at the point now where the customers are really generating the thought leadership around what happens next with generative AI. Because if you like, we've reached our limits of exploitation as a vendor in terms of what we can suggest to people, and now people are picking it up and, you know, throwing a lot more information back to us. So, you know, what are things going to look like for Greywing in 2030?
Or for the world?
Okay, well, yeah, it's easier because I want to be humble, right? And if I talk about what I really think is going to happen for Greywing, it's not going to be very humble. I mean, I think we're really going to, you know, have a really interesting time. It's going to be super, super good.
I'm waiting for that moment that we close this full circle and we turn bubble tea into a bubble tea on your sailing boat that you wanted to buy when it's done.
Yeah, maybe. But it wasn't bubble tea so much as I remember it. It was
For me, it
Doper
was.
ice creams. But anyway, that's my own personal. Maybe I was the ice creams, you were the bubble tea. I had a conversation with my co-founder the other day about this. We were talking about generative AI, the impact it's having on the industry. And he was talking about the work that he wanted to do and how he wants to go deeper into AI, because that's, you know, that's where the tailwind is. That's where the bleeding edge of technology can be right now, and that's where the big improvements are. And I was asking him, well, what advice would you give me? You know, because he's on the cutting edge of generative AI, you know, building products that have never existed before. So if you look at someone that's non-technical, it's like 42 years old, is working in the shipping industry, which is all true of me, what advice would you give them? And I think what he said was something along the lines of, every job that you know right now is either going to be done by AI or it's going to be done by a human that's augmented with AI in how they work. So if you're not adopting AI, you're going to lose. I don't think he put it quite that ruthlessly because he's much nicer than I am. But broadly speaking, that's what he said. And when he said that, I really sat back and thought about it, because whilst I might be, you know, CEO of an AI company, you know, whilst we're focused on AI, while day to day, you know, I'm thinking about how to bring AI into this industry, you know, I really take a lot of time to reflect on how this is going to impact, you know, someone in my position, particularly who's non-technical, and how that's, you know, going to influence our lives. And I think it's something that I'm really working hard on is to think about what's my relationship like with AI in terms of proactively adopting it. Because when I think back, when it took me till like 2005 or 2006 to get a Gmail account, or a Hotmail account, I just wasn't using technology for ages. And, no doubt that kind of like slowed down my ability to adopt and to be more open to opportunities into the future. And to also, just more broadly create the conditions for success. It's not even the action that you need to take around, doing AI. You've got to start with the awareness. So I'd say, and I've completely forgotten your question, but I'd say, for me, looking forward into the future, I want to make sure that I've, got an embedded awareness of AI, what's happening and where it's going. And then I want to take, small, carefully measured actions to introduce AI, both into my personal life to augment how I operate as a human being, but then, more broadly into my work life, where it's not part of our core product that we're selling to customers, but where we're thinking about, okay, well, maybe instead of growing the team, how can we introduce AI to support team members? How can our team be augmented by AI to make them, 2, 3, 4 times more effective than they are currently, so that we can maintain what we love, which is this small footprint, this tight-knit team of awesome humans who are able to deliver, but empower them to do more and to have greater impact. And I think that's really, when I think about the advice that Rishi gave me, that's probably wise advice for anyone that's, in a career at the moment where you're not looking at retirement, is how is AI going to augment your ability to deliver value?
So with that, what is the advice that you would give me?
Oh, I don't know if I can give you any advice, Gordana.
We've been on the calls quite often about this, though. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're giving each other advice so much as emotional support of being a startup. But from your perspective, I think what you guys are doing is super interesting. I think one of the advantages that you've got is that the actions that vessel operators need to take is backed by legislation, which is going to force people to move. And I think I don't know how much you've shared publicly about your business model, but I think your business model's quite smart because at least the one that you described to me was free to set up, and then you kind of pay to play, which is really de-risks everything from a customer's perspective. And potentially, if it's pay to play, even puts the customer in the perspective where they can pass that cost off to a charterer or to a different operator because they're able to break it down on that basis. In terms of advice I'd give you,
maybe personally, what should I build within to keep the pace?
I mean, I don't know if I've got much good personal advice because all I do is work, sleep, eat, and occasionally go to the gym, but I do a lot more eating than I do going to the gym if you speak to my girlfriend. Look, I think being in the maritime industry, I would come in, I'd start working, I'd keep your burn extremely low, and I'd keep iterating on the product that you've got until you get a real sense of product market fit. And it's only at the point where you kind of get that real pull of the product market fit that I would really start hiring the team and growing out the team. I think one of the kind of common problems for people setting up startups is that they get early signs of product market fit, which are illusory or don't represent what's really happening on the ground. And I would really just keep going until you get to the point where the market's pulling the product out of the business so quickly that you're unable to keep up. And what is the market's pulling the product out of the business so quickly is that people are signing deals with you. They're trying to pay you money, and you're in a position where people are trying to get you to execute contracts as the vendor, which is something that I think is a real indication of product market fit. And what I'd say, and this is more generic advice for startups, is that people take early signs of basic validation as being too indicative that they've hit product market fit. So yeah, I mean that's what I do. Strap in for the long haul. Keep your burn low. Kind of find some great customers and do great work with them. Don't get too many customers, and make sure the customers that you do get, you like them personally as well as having that financial relationship. I think I've been so lucky with customers that I've worked with because I think they're all genuinely awesome people, and by their very nature, they are innovators. and early adopters, and they're trying to move the industry forward, and they've got their eye not only on where the industry was when they arrived, but where the industry can be whilst they're here, and perhaps when they leave it. How can they leave it in a better place? So, yeah, that's what I'd say: is strap in for the long haul, find some awesome customers that want to help you improve the industry, and if you do those two things, I think you'll have a great journey.
Thank you. And the last bonus question: if you were a ship, which ship would you be and why?
So I had to think about this because you gave me a heads up on the questions before, and I think I'd probably be something like a Handymax or a handy-sized bulk carrier. Because you're always going to be in work, you're always going to be doing different cargoes, you're always going to go to the most interesting ports. You're not going to get stuck at just going to big ports where big ships can go. And I think there's more longevity in it. If I look at the hydrocarbons industry, all right, maybe apart from chemical tankers, I think as other energy sources become available, product tankers, perhaps within our lifetimes, and VLCCs will begin to diminish in terms of their value. Maybe I'm looking too far ahead, to be honest. But, I'm pretty sure within, we'll always need, or I can't see a world where we don't need bulk carriers, carrying the basic building blocks of pretty much everything that we have in the world from one place to another. And container vessels, I mean, I've got some container vessel customers, so I have to be careful about this. I think a container vessel, for me, there's not enough variation. They're always going to the same ports. They've got their fixed routes. They're doing the same thing for 6 months. Whereas I think the cool thing is if I was a ship and I could be a, handy-sized bulk carrier, I'd be like, I'd never know where I was going next. And I think I'd like that adventure.
I love that. And I do think that this question actually, for me, ties back this personal relationship, that between the heavy asset industry and us as people. And I do think that there's so many of us in the world and only together it makes it fun. That is the equivalent for the industry, right? It would be boring and not efficient if it was just one type, right? So you need this diversity.
But let me throw that question back at you. So what vessel are you going to be? If you've got to be a vessel, what are you and what are you doing?
I think I like diversity and short routes, right? So I would probably be one of these smaller feeder vessels that kind of like delivering things to the places that are hard to reach.
Yeah, okay.
I would like that. And again, having the direct contact with the communities, with the people.
Yeah.
And seeing those smiles on the faces when they finally get what they need to get.
Yes, yeah.
That would be me, I think.
Oh, cool.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for inviting me on. It's been a real pleasure to see you as always. And I hope we get the chance to do it again soon.